Alrighty, welcome back, lads. The first Three Mates instalment of the podcast since August. We say it every time, long overdue, but I think for good reason. Our lives have been busy. I think that is a sentiment that most people would share about 2024. I feel whilst the B word, busy, is a word that gets tossed around a lot these days. I seen Chris Williamson had something up on his story or on his Instagram today, a post that said something along the lines of, in quotation marks, this week's been busy, but next week things will slow down, is something that you say every week as a grown adult in the modern era. And there's so much truth to it that our lives are busier than ever. And it's meant that it's been a little bit longer between drinks, metaphorically speaking, than I think we would have liked to have sat down and recorded today. But end of another year, and as Phoons was saying before, that means that naturally you start to reflect a little bit on the year that was, and we always see these as a great opportunity to sit down amongst us here as great mates and guys that I really like to open up and share in front of and just reflect on the year that was and set some intention for 2025. So, Joey, Phoons, how are you, lads?
Doing great. I've got silly season's got its talons into me at the moment. Got Christmas parties out the wazoo, a few side quests, but good time of year.
Bloody oath.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling good. It's interesting you speak about busy because I've officially, clocked off for the year. Maybe another half a day of work before I really disconnect and deregulate. I mean, the opposite of deregulate. Re-regulate my nervous system. And I'm really looking forward to this period to just relax because I can feel myself being a little bit addicted to the busy. And we'll get into it. It's been an amazing year. All of us have had lots going on. And I know personally the success of this year has meant that things have sped up. And I'm looking so forward to just slowing down, like disconnecting, plugging out, going off the grid, so to speak. And really, it just giving ourselves space for, or myself space for, the better part of 2 weeks, 20 days, whatever it might be. But I really want to do it the right way and kind of kick busyness to the curb and just relax. So this marks, a time where I will 100% be reflecting and take in the next couple of weeks to just really check back in with, man, what happened this year? Like December, what the hell? It was only 3 months ago we're speaking on the last podcast, and that flew. Like, this stuff really moves in a blink of an eye, and I think it's because we don't necessarily stop and reflect and take stock, and that's okay. That's necessary. We're a fast-moving society, fast-moving culture, young men getting after it, but equally important to at least stop at this time of the year. I suppose makes sense for most people, and just go, what the fuck just happened? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? How did we get here? How do I feel? Wow. All right. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really cool chat to just touch on that a little bit. I think the structure of it will be, kind of touching into maybe what were some of the challenges or maybe major challenges that we faced this year. And then just reflecting on some of the takeaways from those, some lessons that we can use to inform next year. And yeah, I think we're just going to flow our way through that conversation.
I don't know if this resonates with you boys, but one thing I've been thinking about quite a lot is this feels like the most I've ever needed a break mentally.
Oh yeah, dude. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do you think that's the bias of being in this year? Like, there's that great Seneca quote that we often suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And I'm trying to think, do I feel like that every year? But I genuinely feel like the answer to that is no. I feel like this is the most I've ever needed to slow down. And because of that, I feel like it's so hard to stop. So I'm literally banning myself from, after today, I'm not recording another pod until at least the second week of Jan. I just want 2 weeks completely off where I can almost shut my mind down to let my mind wander a little bit and answer some questions from the year.
Yep.
And it's so hard when you're juggling a bunch of different balls to think about maybe the major problems you need to solve or the questions you need to ask yourself to actually reflect. And when I feel like more than ever, when you have a bunch of different areas in your life that you're putting energy into, you don't necessarily feel like you're completely present in any which one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think this year, I guess this part of this year is the most I've felt I need to slow down. And maybe that's a symptom of us valuing that a little bit more. You know, maybe our growth over the last, 18 months or so that we've been doing this podcast, and we've really identified and put some respect on this idea of reflecting, slowing down, taking stock. So maybe we're just at a point where we go, yeah, we actually value slowing down a lot more, and we're realizing we need it more. We're like a little bit more self-aware about how important it is. Because this has been like a big year, a busy year, but maybe not like the craziest year I've ever had. Maybe not the most fast-paced year I've ever had, but it for sure feels like the year I need to slow down the most for this period. So, yeah, what do you reckon, Phoons?
The natural progression of getting a little bit older as well. I think you probably value the downtime or the slower time a little bit more than you probably previously had.
Yep.
We live in a world of constant distraction, constant stimulation, social media, like everything's busy, everything's distraction. It's almost in your day-to-day life, you almost have to like schedule downtime. So now I've got a period, an opportunity where you can do that. I think you probably take it, or you appreciate that more than you probably previously have.
Yeah. I think the noise, for me, I agree with you, Phoons. I think for me, the noise is maybe what has made this period so welcome for me to go, thank God, we can chill for a couple of weeks. Because the noise in society has been ramped up so much, from elections. And I guess this is just showing the things that I consume. From cryptocurrency volatility to the elections to my own business and the workload associated with that, to personal relationships, to family relationships. There's been a lot of noise where it's like, cool, let's turn that down, turn that off. And I think maybe culturally there's been a lot of noise in the last probably six or so months that has taken up a lot of energetic space, and I can feel it. And the symptoms of that to me are spending too much time, I guess, consuming that stuff, being on the phone, being on YouTube, being in the realm of this like chaos, and yeah, unplug. It's going to be the tough thing for me, I think.
I think
addicted to the busy. It's like time. There'll be a period where I'll get irritated because I'm not doing stuff. I think give me a week of like just sitting with that, and then I'll have a week of like actually being able to be present and relax, and then we go again.
I think similar to one of my lessons from this year, which I'll share a little bit later, is thinking about this idea of Chinese water torture and how that applies to your own life.
Oh yeah,
now, bear with me here. The idea of Chinese water torture
I haven't
is
been able to stop thinking about it.
this overstimulus of just small drop of water on your head over time, and how that equates to a torturous feeling. It can be the most seemingly insignificant stimulus that builds up over time. And I was thinking about how that can actually apply to the year that was. And sometimes you go, well, this certainly wasn't this year didn't have the most catastrophic challenges that years before have had. Like my health was relatively good from a CF perspective, and there wasn't any kind of major life crises over the last 12 months. But the consistent stimulus of being in a rush all the time and having so much on my plate and so little time for myself has left me feeling the way that I do, which is, to be fair, quite drained. And so I think there's a great lesson in that if you feel like you're quite empty and quite drained at this point of the year, it doesn't have to be the result of any major catastrophic events. It can just be the consistency of everything.
Yeah. In a roundabout way, that makes a lot of sense, how Chinese water torture relates to our lives at the moment. Yeah, I agree, man.
Hey, I was thinking, why don't we approach this today for a little bit of fun? Because I feel like there's going to be a lot of lessons that we all bring to the surface that maybe relate with the others. So instead of us addressing absolutely everything we've thought about for ourselves in 3 different segments, why don't we all bring something up and then we can kind of sit with it and think about it and go from person to person throughout the course of the pod.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. I might kick it off.
Lead the show.
So I've been just writing a little bit and reflecting and going back over journals this last sort of couple of days, thinking about today's episode. And I think one of the biggest lessons for me this year, which I spoke about a little bit recently, I did a bit of a social post on it, is this idea that life is not linear. I think when we think about our progression and success, especially as young, ambitious men, you can have this notion in your head that life moves in a linear direction towards the major goals or dreams you have for yourself. And I feel like over the course of the last, 3.5 to 4 years, I have had this like pretty linear progression that made me, I guess it kind of gave me greater expectation for this year on a professional level. And ultimately that led to a bit of frustration. And so I feel like I've had to remind myself this year that at no point in human history has anything looked linear across a long timeline. Like if you look at the growth of property prices or stocks, there are certainly dips and ebbs and flows in the structure of that rise. And that's something that you have to get comfortable with, looking at life and being present whilst remembering that life exists on a longer timeline than just a 12-month basis.
Some people would argue that Chinese water torture is somewhat linear.
Yes, Chinese water torture seems to be. Life, on the other hand, in this case, is not. And I think for me that came at maybe a cost of my inner peace at times this year, where I felt really frustrated. And I guess one of the other lessons that I'll tie into this is the idea of trying to emphasize effort over reward or experience over achievement for me this year. I think when you're an ambitious person, you think so much about the outcomes as the ruler of how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your effort. I've had to try and learn, which is an ever-evolving process, to think about, man, you showed up consistently this year, you put in effort, you did what you knew was required of you to move in the direction of your goals. If the outcomes quite aren't where you want them to be, that doesn't change your worth, or that shouldn't change how proud you are of yourself. It's just the outcome. Sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail.
Yep. Welcome to Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you guys feel that resonates on any level?
Yeah, for sure. Foony.
Yeah, definitely. It was probably one of my number one lessons where previously in my life I haven't felt, I guess it's a pressure, or I don't know, where it's like an overarching pressure where I don't feel like I'm where I'm meant to be. And like that almost ever growing stress. I think when I was younger, I could like bet the farm, go all in on business, and it didn't matter because it was only me. But I think as I'm naturally getting older, like there's some new emotions that I'm feeling in life where I want to be an entrepreneur again. I think I've talked about on the pod, I had a business fail this year and I want to get back into entrepreneurship. But now the second time I'm going into it, I'm faced with almost these different emotions where I want to have a family, I want to be in a relationship, I want to have kids when I'm older. I didn't have those thoughts or feelings going into entrepreneurship the first time, but going into it the second time, like that's at the back of my mind. It's almost like I feel like it almost comes across as like a fear. So like I've almost got new fears or new emotions in my mind, and it's only really upon reflecting on it that I felt can kind of figure out what they are. So I was like, am I just getting older and turned into a pussy? I'm like, where's this fear coming from? I just think it's that I want different things when I get older and I can't keep going down the same path that I have been going down. So it's like almost a tug of war, but I think just being conscious of those emotions, like I only really put a bow around it this morning when I sat down for 10 minutes and thought like, where is this stress or this pressure? Like, where's that coming from? I think what I want in my 30s is different to what I want in my 20s. So I think it's just putting some thought around that and working that into my day-to-day life, if that makes sense.
Well, I certainly feel a similar feeling to that. I think on the cusp of 30 and getting married next year, and we're very excited about kids. And so naturally you start to think about what your life will look like when that time comes. And I don't know how you feel about this, Phoons, but do you feel that the potential bit of fear or that anxiousness you have about being a dad in business and entrepreneurship is around structuring a business and a life right now that supports the time and things you will need to be a capable present dad? Or is it a rush to be successful in order to feel like you can be present and enjoy family?
I definitely think it's both. Like, I'm 32 now, so if, like, when my current life at the moment, I'm 32. If I sold everything I owned, I'd have a negative net worth. I've been single for 5 years, and I don't even really know what I'm meant to be doing right now. Like, no one at 20 wants to be in my situation at 32. So I think there's definitely a pressure to figure out what I want to do, and then also be that protector, provider, be a good dad as I get older. So I think it's burn the candle at both ends. But I think it's a good pressure to have if you can harness it.
And I think just listening to when you mentioned like the anxiety or the anxiousness around and pressure around where you want to go, Phoons, I was just thinking that fear, right, or that anxiousness comes from an awareness now of going, okay, cool, here's where I'm at in my timeline, here's where I want to be, here's where I was. But that is all super valuable stock that's going to probably accelerate you quicker to where you want to be. Like, it's wisdom, right? So without that awareness, without that anxiousness, without that fear, if you didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to put metrics, systems, plans into place to get you where you want to be. I'm not sure who said it, but someone mentioned that feelings of anxiousness in men is just because of a lack of kind of like a lack of a plan. So once we have a plan that we can move towards, and we have systems in place that are getting us towards where we want to be, it's no longer anxiousness. It's just like the anxiousness fades because we're on purpose. We're on path.
That's the journey.
And that's the journey. So it's like when you said, Brad, the idea of the pressure of fatherhood, where do you need to be before you start family, whatnot, that anxiousness might just be because you haven't set actual parameters on going, well, what do I actually need in order to feel comfortable to be a dad? Well, I want to have my finances in this place, like specifically in this place. I want to be in this point in career, or I want to have this much emotional stability. So until you get super clear on the things, it feels like this big anxiety-inducing, fear-inducing, unstable idea where it's like, well, I know I want to have kids and be a dad, but fuck, like I'm negative net worth and this. But once you go, no, okay, so I need to have, to comfortably have a family, I want to have this much money in my bank account. Cool. We get on mission, we get on purpose. And then it drives you towards something without the anxiety, so to speak. So getting super clear on it, apparently, according to this anonymous person who I'm quoting right now, is like you create the blueprint, you create the systems, you create the plan, and the anxiety fades away from that in the masculine, apparently. So
Yeah, it's interesting because then my brain goes to, and I get exactly what you're saying, because I think there's so many parallels here. Like, my first 3 lessons were life is not linear. The second being effort over reward, experiences over achievement, what we just spoke about. The third being consistent small efforts today may not change tomorrow, but will make you unrecognizable in 10 years. And I think this is exactly what we're speaking about. There's like this overarching theme that as a guy, or at least for me personally, and I think I could say so for the lounge today, because of the way that we're wired, you feel a sense of responsibility to solve today's problems by tomorrow in order to be the man you want to be as soon as you possibly can. One thing that Cal, my brother-in-law, and I have been talking about recently in relation to both training but life is we rarely think about what are the small but consistent habits, systems, standards that I can put in place today that really do little to transform you by tomorrow, but in 10 years make you unrecognizable. Like if I consistently go to the gym twice a week and run 3 days a week for the next 10 years, right, I will arguably be unrecognizable if I continue to change the stimulus of stress on my body as I progress. Like that's actually a really exciting feeling I get when I think about that I don't have to have it all figured out by 29, but if by 38 with a couple of kids, I've been physically consistent, mentally consistent, and I've continued to work towards the kind of man I want to be in 10 years' time, that output consistently makes me unrecognizable.
The concept of delayed gratification.
For sure.
That is the whole crux of that, which is so hard to do in a I need this now, I wanted it yesterday culture and society we live in. And I know you've spoken on delayed gratification, I think, Phoons. But it's yeah, I think that's one of the key Stoic philosophies, if any, that have become kind of popular in the manosphere space, is like do hard stuff now for the benefit of your future self, but then to make it more digestible. It's not like suffer, kill yourself now so that you'll build the calloused resilience to be able to handle the world. But I like how you're saying it, Brad, like standard, create a standard for yourself. Make it a realistic standard. For some people, it could be brush your teeth every single day and every single night. For the next 10 years, you're going to have great teeth. You're not going to have fake veneers or whatever. I love the idea of standards because it's something over the last few years I've started to introduce for myself as well. And I have this mantra at the moment, it's on my fridge, which is become the man. And that's not in this like, become the man, be the top dog, be an alpha, be the tough guy. No, it's become the man. Become the man that you know you're capable of being.
Show up for yourself every day.
Become the man that you want to be. Become the man that you hope to be. Become the man that you will be. Become the man. Well, what would that man do right now? And it sounds silly, but I have even little standards like, would the man that you're becoming, would you catch him running through Woolies flustered because he's late to a barbecue and he's just been at the beach, so he's running around with no shoes and socks on with sandy feet and he's got soggy board shorts on to quickly pick up something? No, he wouldn't. So you're not going to catch me in Woolies barefoot with sandy feet. That's a standard I have for myself. It sounds silly, but I'm like, as the man that I want to be, he's going to take the extra 2 minutes to dust off his feet, put shoes and socks on, and then be walking through Woolies with shoes on. Sounds silly, but as a 30-year-old man, the standard I have for myself is it's not acceptable to be barefoot walking through Woolies with sandy feet. We live in coastal Wollongong, so that you see that. And that's fine for other people, but my standard is no, put your shoes on. And that small standard is me taking a second to go, no, respect yourself enough to live up to the standard. Whilst no one else might care whether you're barefoot with sandy feet and Woolies or not, you would prefer not to be. And it might be more inconvenient that you have to stop and put shoes on, but this is a standard you're setting for yourself. And when I show up for myself in tiny little standards like that, I mentioned the brushing the teeth one. I'm like an avid brusher teether. Once in the morning, once at night.
Is that what you call it, a brusher teether?
I'm a brusher teether, brother.
If you put that bristle to the tooth in the morning, you're a brusher teether.
Or if you've brushed your teeth, then you're a brusher toother.
Yeah.
It's past tense. So, that's another standard. Yeah.
You mentioned there that idea of becoming. Something that I feel like for me is ease some of the potential anxiety that you can feel when you're thinking about who you want to become is just embracing the idea of being. Like, because all of these things we're talking about here today, we know to be true. So it's already within us. It's just a matter of acting on it. And in acting on it, you're just being who you know you're already capable of being. Mm-hmm. And there's a great story I was told this year that I can't remember if I told you boys this on the pod or not the last time we sat down, but the story of the statue of David. which feels relevant because I've got the statue of David on the inside of my left arm. And I hope I'm getting this right because historians will slander me for this, but Michelangelo being the sculptor, 99% sure I've got that correct. It was one of the Michaels, one of the famous Michaels, I believe, who seen this boulder in the middle of the square at Florence, eventually has this boulder rolled away, sculpts it to bring it back and reveal it as the statue of David, which was seen as such a beautiful sculpture and such an incredible piece of artwork. And when asked by a woman in the square how he came to create the sculpture of David, Michelangelo said that when I seen the sculpture of David, when I seen that boulder in the square, I always saw David in it. I just needed to remove everything that wasn't him. And I think there's almost a healthy frame that we forget as young, ambitious people. When you're thinking about the kind of person that you want to be, you think about all the things you need to do as opposed to maybe some of the things you just need to remove from yourself. And like, I think there's certainly things that if I remove certain negative behaviors, limiting beliefs, certain habits that are reductive of character, then I feel a lot closer to a state in which I'm at peace with myself.
Yeah. Well, like, it's already within you, right? It's not this idea that, like, we need to add and have external forces come and add to this recipe so that we can become more. Like, the idea of, like, chipping away to reveal yourself is like, you're capable of it. It's within you. Be more of what you have inside of you, what you know to be true, your fullest potential. And I think identifying what those standards are for yourself, also having the confidence in yourself and knowing that you do have beautiful, full potential. Your higher self is an awesome, successful, happy, peaceful, passionate experience of a human being. That is within you. And then you just have to move more and more towards that, not by adding, but maybe just doubling down on that belief. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a pretty cool little analogy to use, as in, like, chipping away at the elements to reveal more of yourself, as opposed to just adding more, doing more. Yeah.
Just back on delayed gratification, I'm pretty sure that was one of my values when we did the value episode. I think it's something I'm probably better at than most people, just due to the fact I grew up with a dad that was constantly pushing me to always do better. So I was blessed to grow up racing motorbikes, but dad was always pushing me, like, always take the hard path, always do the hard thing. And it's kind of wired me to be comfortable with delayed gratification. I think recently I reflected on it, and I think pain with purpose isn't pain, it's a blessing. Like, there's always going to be the delayed gratification is pain, but if you're doing it for a reason or there's a purpose, I think in hindsight you can look back at it and it's almost a blessing.
I want to ask you two things off the back of that. Because you're wired that way, and there's certainly a sense of that in me too, probably less so than you are, but I wonder how you feel about, like, delayed gratification is such a healthy habit and such a healthy value. Do you find it really challenging, though, then to feel proud of yourself for where you are?
Well, the extreme version of delayed gratification is no gratification. So at some point, you've got to realize where you're at, and if you're, like, blindly heading down a path that doesn't need to feel pain.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of pain and purpose, like, I can see it in your eyes. You're like, it resonates with you. And you see it a lot now, you know, that's that Goggins mentality. That's the Ned Brockman ethos of, like, well, I can't just fundraise for homelessness. I need to suffer, like, extreme pain under this really righteous purpose. And when they're married together, amazing things happen. I don't necessarily resonate with the idea of pain or the necessity for pain. I think resistance maybe feels like a better word for me, and maybe it's one and the same. But yeah, like, having delayed gratification is important. I don't know if we need to introduce pain per se with a purpose in order to be gratified and fulfilled. But I think the point you made there is really crucial, Phoons, because there might be a lot of people that can latch onto that. Yeah, like delay that gratification. I get it. Like, but don't get to a point where you're never gratifying yourself. You're never stopping and going, wow, man, I'm actually doing okay. Like maybe that's the devil advocate approach to.
I don't know if this is just me, but I'm sure other people could resonate. Like I think I would feel guilty if I got to a point of success and didn't feel pain. I don't know if it's like wired in me to like, I don't know, it's almost like you got to tick it off to get like, you're not worthy of success without feeling some sort of pain.
Yeah. I guess that's understanding what that pain is, you know, like whether is it physical pain? Is it emotional pain?
I think for me, definitely where I went off track for a little bit a few years ago, I think like that almost necessity to feel pain turned into like self-sabotage.
Right.
And then I definitely went down the wrong path there. But yeah, I suppose just framing that delayed gratification so it's pain with purpose and you're not just feeling unnecessary pain and torturing yourself.
Yeah.
It's such a balance, isn't it? Because there is...
It's tricky to know
like
how
I said,
you're using
yeah.
it.
Well, there's so much value in the idea of the delayed gratification, but one of the things I've found, you know, I've spoken about in the past, there's a innate desire in me to put myself into places of pain and suffering to feel more deserving of maybe some of the love I received, to feel more deserving of some of the accolades. Like I think about it often in this space. This started, this being the podcast and speaking on stage and all of that, as a product of some very challenging times of my life with my health. And it felt very noble. This idea that, I'm suffering from a health perspective and I've found the light at the end of the tunnel, and I feel like a bit of a warrior for finding ways to overcome that, and that feels noble. But the idea of existing in a space of contentment and peace and joy doesn't feel like I'm deserving of reward for that, which is so ridiculous. I know that sounds ridiculous, and I'm reminding myself that no, that's not the case. Like, you're deserving of the success you achieve because you're showing up in the world in a way that's ultimately allowing that to happen. And the thing I've probably struggled with the most this year, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is just an absolute lack of self-love and self-care this year, which has probably existed under the surface more than I've realised. And that's been a big lesson for me at the end of the year. I think as my mental energy has drained, some of that has come to the surface. And so, yeah, it's such a fickle beast life, you know.
Well, even you mentioned it then, Phoons, the idea of self-sabotage. And I wonder if there's this subconscious thing at play, Brad, where life starts to move, things get to a point of comfort where you're like, wow, I've got the girl of my dreams. I'm marrying the girl of my dreams. The podcast is... I'm getting opportunities with the podcast, and I'm having guests that 2 years I dreamed of having, and my health's pretty good. And so we ramp things up, maybe unconsciously, that we let our health slide, and then we have the health scare, and that creates the pain, which can then fuel and be the catalyst for the next iteration of like inspiration, and we can go to the next level because we hit rock bottom again. And so it's that classic dynamic we see and we hear of in, you know, whether it was artists or whether it was rock stars, where they couldn't create unless they were in the fucking pits of hell. Where it's like, I need to self-sabotage enough to get the inspiration to change. And then in that change comes the phoenix out of the flames. And that's the sexy part of the story. And we go on this roller coaster of like, let me self-sabotage, let me hit rock bottom, or a version of that for ourselves. And then that sparks change, and then we rocket out of it. We get a certain level of success, which is usually the ceiling of what our self-esteem is, how highly we love or view ourselves. And then once we reach that pinnacle of like, cool, here's what I think I deserve, here's how good I think I am. And for a lot of people, that's probably pretty low. So they get to the ceiling of self-belief, self-love, self-worth, and then they go, let me self-sabotage again. And then you keep rocketing or roller coasting, up and down. And we're like, cool, look at this momentum I'm getting. but then I'm losing, but then I'm getting, and then I'm losing. And we get addicted to the rise. And we've spoken about it, this idea of getting comfortable with mediocrity, getting comfortable with less volatility, and maybe not needing to be, not needing to have the highs and the lows. But I don't know if us as young men have had the lessons or have the insights yet to go, maybe there's the happy space in the middle where I can understand that, all right, Joe, you're self-sabotaging here a bit. Let's not do that because we're okay and we can just stay in this space. So I don't know. I'm maybe posing it to you, Brad, the idea that like you've let the health, and you said you've had maybe a relatively great health year, but now as things are ramped up, the health might be lowering or suffering a little bit. Do we recognize it now, or do we wait till something gets fucked up and that creates inspiration for change?
I think
You know,
even
what do you
a
mean?
level,
What do you think?
a level deeper than that is, are you using pain or purpose to fuel you every day? I think the lower you go, the more pain you get. I think pain's a better motivator than purpose, but that candle can only burn for so long. Whereas purpose, I think, is like a slow, not quite as intense, but can burn forever. Whereas pain, I think, is a more intense motivator, but you can only use it for short periods of time.
Yeah, it's I flow between both. If I'm being honest, I think there's probably an inconsistency in what motivates me, where there's certain, say, pains and resistance, challenges, whatever you want to label it, around what I do professionally, Monday to Saturday, that I don't love. And I know what I do love. You know, people who listen to this podcast are well aware of that. And the pain is, I want to do more of what I love for a living because I know how important it is to me, but to other people. And there's so much purpose in that. And every time I sit down in front of the mic, I feel that purpose at play. And that's a beautiful feeling. I feel very content when I'm in front of the mic because I'm in the act of being on purpose. When I'm in my other office, I feel this pain of, I don't want to exist here forever. And that forces me to act out of impulse and frustration, where I'm booking 5 episodes next week and I'm absolutely going foot to the floor all out until I got nothing left. And then I get burnt out and then I go, hey, I need to remember that I don't need to change everything that I don't necessarily love about my life tomorrow, that this is a process, that I have to be patient with myself, I have to give myself compassion, and then I ease off a little bit, but then I feel the pain, but I want it now. And it's this constant, I've been referring to it as life jiu-jitsu. You know, like you start to find yourself in a position of strength, but ultimately like you start to forget about the other thing, and then all of a sudden someone's rolled you and you're not in full guard anymore, and you know you're fighting from the bottom. And it's learning to love the flow. I think is not feeling like any position. This is so much more relevant to you boys than it is to me, because I'm not on the jiu-jitsu mats, but we're all on the life mats, right? So it's like learning to trust in your strength and capability from any position, not just what seems to be the seemingly dominant position.
Well, let me give you another jiu-jitsu insight then, right? So the idea, and one of the greatest of all time, Gordon Ryan, speaks about the strength.
Craig Jones fans everywhere furious right now.
The strength of a jiu-jitsu athlete is his ability to be in bad positions. And so what makes him so great is the confidence he has in himself to get out of the worst positions, the deepest submissions, the most disadvantaged sequences. So he knows that in the worst spot, he is capable of escaping and turning that ship around. And so the thing that has allowed him to do that, is by being in those positions. And so if we use that in the analogy of life, it's understanding that if we understand that our character can withstand the pits of hell, if we understand that the systems the values, the standards that we put in place are strong enough to support us when things are terrible, then we have less fear to fall to those depths, because we understand that our foundations are solid, man. And the way that we know our foundations are solid are being put in those positions.
A true test of character. I suppose you don't know how strong you are until it's your only option.
And that's where it matters. That's where it matters. And we've spoken about it before. And Brad, I think you posed this quote to the lounge. It was, character is built not in our highest moments, but it's built in our lowest. So when we're in those low moments, it is the hardest to actually internalize this as a philosophy. But this is where it matters. When our emotions are shot, when we're dysregulated, when we're irrational, when we're weak, when we're vulnerable, that's where you build the character. And that's where you build the confidence. And that's where you build the self-belief. And the self-belief turns into action. And then the action turns into results. And the results turn into actions. Like we've talked about that belief loop. Where it's...
That's the magic, baby.
Yeah, and that's the magic. But it has to come from a place of pain. Has to come from a place of resistance. Has to come from a place of discomfort. That's where it's built. And so, yeah, this idea of life jiu-jitsu is going, well, I need this. I need this bad position. I need this low. And this is where I'm building the stock that I can lean on and know what I'm actually made of. What's my fabric? And that comes in the tougher times.
It gets me fired up talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And it's I can speak for myself and say that I feel I'm very proud of my character at this point in my life. Very proud of my character. And I don't think I don't think it's a bad thing to feel prideful of something that's that important, right? Like your sense of character and your sense of respect. Like I can look at myself in the mirror and respect the man that I am, which I think there's a lot to be said for that. I would love to think that you boys can think the same, because I think you should.
Double chin and all.
Yeah, double chin and all. Double chin and all. And it's but it's a balance of reminding yourself that you're not always your feelings. You know, if you feel sometimes like you're not reaching your potential, you're not living up to your standard, it's important to be aware of that. But it's important to know when negative feelings are impacting the way that you actually should feel about yourself. If that makes sense.
Pass, young grasshopper.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. What are we thinking, boys? What do we take from here?
Well,
is there anything that you want to bring up, Joey?
Well, I think if we just kind of give it a slight, I guess, bullet point in what we just spoke about there, the one was, which I really resonate with, is the idea of effort over outcome. I think that's a super important thing, which I've learned through jiu-jitsu competition. Brad, you're learning and have learned through the things you're exploring now, especially with podcasts, is like, am I doing my absolute best with the resources I have right now?
How do you measure your effort?
I think there's an honesty that we need to have with ourselves. If you set, I guess, a plan, which is objective. Brad's 3 times a week running, 2 times in the gym. So you can set objective measures that you need to show up for, and then you know whether you're showing up for them or not. So for me, the effort in, for example, if it's in a jiu-jitsu context leading into competition, did I put my best foot, intention, physical effort forward, even in the face of discomfort? When I said that I was going to go to 4 competition classes leading into it, did I go to the 4? Because on that 3rd competition class, I'd had a 10-hour day on set, and I was tired, and my body was a little bit sore, and it was easier to go home to a warm meal cooked by my girlfriend. Did I go, or did I justify not going? And then you know whether your effort was honest, whether it was authentic or not. So I feel like in the space of losing, failing, when you put forward honest effort and authentic effort, it's super digestible. That failure, because I've been in that position, I've done everything I could. I turned every stone I could. And I can even talk about it in a past relationship context. My effort was infallible. I know deep down in my heart that I put my best efforts forward to create and maintain something to flourish that ultimately failed. The relationship broke down. The relationship was no longer. But I was okay with that because I knew how honest my efforts were. I've failed in competition. I've lost competition before. And the same thing. I was okay with that failure because I knew I did what I could. And whilst I'm like, fuck, that kind of sucks, and I'll learn from it, whatever, I was like, I left the space the same way that I entered it. At peace and content with my effort. Because what more could I have done? And that's a solid place to be in. Like, I couldn't have done any more, and I believe that. I'm not just telling myself that to feel good. I believe that I did everything I could.
Yeah, because I resonate with that hard. I've only had 2 failures in my life where I've gone all in on something and it didn't work. And that was racing motorbikes as a kid. And when I retired from that, I had like peace. There was no what ifs. There was no anything. I literally tried as hard as I could, and I know that in my heart of hearts.
Yeah.
And come up short, and I'm fine with that. I can move on. I love watching motocross. I respect how hard the top athletes are.
Doesn't haunt you.
No, it doesn't haunt me at all. And even with my recent business failure, like as soon as I hung it up, I was almost at peace because I didn't go to bed that night and go, oh, what if I did this or what if I did that? I literally did everything I could, and it didn't work, and I'm at peace with that. But the only way to be at peace, I think, is to go all in and know in your heart of hearts that you did the best that you could.
Yeah.
I think that's a good lesson for me anyway. Probably people listening is, if you do go all in, try as hard as you can and you fail, you'll be at peace. It's only if you don't go 100% that the what ifs will creep in.
That's when regret creeps in, man. And yeah, I can feel that with your business, your last business, Phoons. I can feel that you're like at peace with the outcome. And because we watched you be creative and be experimental and try different avenues and speak to different people and in ways that I didn't even think were possible for you to try to move that business forward. And then I saw the effort and I felt how authentic the effort was. And hey, it didn't take you to where you wanted it to be, but that's not your call. It's a part of the journey. It's a part of life. It wasn't meant to be, because what's meant for you won't miss you. And this one just kept moving on because it wasn't meant for you. And you're cool with that. And I can feel that you're cool with it because you had a fucking crack. You tried.
Well, now that I'm staring down the barrel of my second business, the stress I feel, I'm not worried that I won't show up and give 100%. What I touched on briefly at the start was there's new emotions or new fears that are slowly creeping into my life as I get older. The fact that I do want to be in a relationship, I do want to have a family, like that stuff isn't at the forefront right now. But if I'm going all in, there is sacrifices that come with that. And those sacrifices are going to be at the detriment to stuff that I do want in the future. So it's like a different, just new emotions or new fears that I have going into my second business that weren't even in my mind for the first one.
Let me ask you this, because this is something I've thought about recently. So I love exactly what you said there, Phoons. I highly resonate with it. And I think that it's a journey as a human being to trust your intuition. And your intuition always knows what's right and always knows what's wrong. And it takes time to trust that. You have to almost trust it regardless of the fear that exists and be okay with the idea of failure or success either way, to learn that you usually know what's right for you. And I think the intuition that you spoke about there, Joey, of if it's meant for you, you won't miss it, is something that takes a lot of trust. But I was listening to surprisingly brilliant episode. I say surprisingly brilliant because 2 completely different minds coming together in Theo Von and Timothy Chalamet. I listened to that episode of Theo's pod recently, and there was this great clip that got shared online of Timothy talking about the effort that he puts into his craft. And he was saying, I think it's too incredibly exciting, and I can't remember his exact words, but he was just talking about how much he loves his job. And he said, I think it's too special to be nonchalant about it. He's like, I give so much effort and energy to my craft, and I want to feel the grit of a 16-hour day on set, and I want to soak myself into my character for that 3 months that we're filming, and I want to give every available piece of my energy to it because it deserves that. And he's like, look, I'm not pretending that I'm the hardest worker on planet Earth. There's people who have far more challenging jobs than I do, but I want to feel that graft. And I think in that you get so much purpose and a sense of place and a sense of peace, as you said, because you know that you're giving the effort. And it's one thing I want to challenge you on, which I'm challenging myself on, Phoons, is the idea that...
Accepted in advance.
is the idea that if I go all in, I have to sacrifice something else. It's like I almost feel like Soph has to remind me of this all the time. You going all in on your thing doesn't make me feel less about us or less secure about us. She's like, I get excited for you when I see you putting in the hard yards to do the thing that makes you the kind of person that I love. And it's interesting that I was thinking recently, we've spoken about limiting beliefs before on the pod. As a human being, I believe that you are created with a perfect soul, but you are created with an imperfect nature. And your behaviors, your feelings, your emotions, the conditions of the world that you exist in are imperfect. And therefore, if you have any limiting belief about yourself, your nature will find a way to confirm it sooner or later. And so anytime that you think, anytime that I think, me working as hard as I do right now will come at the sacrifice of a family, I am almost certain to find a way to confirm that in my future reality. Whereas if I believe my family will be at a position of strength because of the way that I show up and work, means that I will ultimately find a way to make that true. And I think it's a challenge for anyone, because I don't think you ever get that philosophy set in stone. But if you can filter yourself and your thoughts and your feelings to come back to that center as often and as quickly as you can in response to your imperfect nature, I hope all of this makes sense for anyone listening.
Dude, I am so on board with this.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it's not actually a philosophy, it's a skill. So it's like, okay, I can feel myself falling into limiting belief, which I did a lot this year. I haven't really voiced this because there's almost like a little bit of shame or guilt as the guy who preaches about it on stage or speaks about it behind a mic. But this year, I felt so out of touch with any kind of love, compassion for self. And I've been so critical. And I feel because of how fatigued I am mentally, I have been very frustrated with myself. And that lack of self-love and that criticism of self consistently has probably been a big condition of why I've worn myself down mentally this year. And just in the last month or so, it's come to the surface that, I just need to be I need to be kinder to myself. I need to look after myself. I had a 10-year school reunion yesterday, and I was thinking about, some of the boys, I haven't seen you for 5 years, or I haven't seen you for 2 years, or, we all haven't caught up together for 10 years. And I was thinking, man, I haven't fucking seen myself for a year. I can't remember the last time I was just with myself. And that's a weird feeling, because I'm usually really good at that. But I have put so much pressure on myself to be everything this year that I forgot to look after me. And so all of those, I think when you're not doing that and when you're not being present with yourself, the limiting beliefs find their way to the surface. Criticism finds its way to the surface. A lack of love and compassion finds its way to the surface. And you become your last priority. And then you forget that to effectively be who you want to be in all your other priorities, you need yourself.
Yeah.
That was very well worded. I think a lot of people would resonate with that. And I would almost go as far to say, if girls want to know what guys struggle with, that was I'd say that's a typical something that most men would struggle with, would be that.
Yeah. And I think it's probably a symptom of you adding more responsibility, pressure, and I guess just adding more to your plate. So the idea of, well, I'm a soon-to-be husband, I'm a soon-to-be dad, this is in the next 2-3 years, I need to start worrying about it now. And so that dynamic creates less self-prioritization. but I offer you this. This, what you're feeling now, is a small opportunity for you to build a system to figure out how you can manage this space, because it will only be the same feeling but exaggerated when you bring kids into the mix. Because if you think it's hard to prioritize yourself now, and this is coming from someone who doesn't have kids, I've only seen my 2 sisters now go through early parenthood. It's, if you don't figure out how to prioritize yourself now efficiently in a meaningful way, what did we do? We added a pending wedding to the mix. We added a new job to the mix. So you can figure that out now. It's hard, but it's the first time you've had to kind of like manage this space. Figure out now, figure out what you need and how you need to get it. And then when you confront that same dynamic by adding another thing to your plate, call it children, you'll go, oh, cool, I know how to manage this. Because last time I lost sight of myself, I fell to this system and it pulled me out. So you're in a space now where I'm imagining you're reflecting and you're trying to develop a way to feel you again, to feel whole again, to find yourself again through the fog of your fucking chaotic life. But that's going to be so important, because whatever you find works to get you back to yourself now will be the golden gem, will be the character that you're building that will hold true in the next iteration of that, which I think for you is when you and Soph have kids.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting, right? Because I think that 90% of that stress is a product of my professional endeavors, because I am realizing more than ever I've put so much of my self-worth in the bucket of who I am as a human doing as opposed to a human being. And that's certainly a learnt behavior. I think it's a learnt behavior when you are so busy and give little time to yourself. I feel that the people close to me have not created any of that stress. It is all created in myself. Because I know that you guys, as close mates, my family, Soph, don't expect the things that I expect of myself. So it's certainly self-created or self-induced. And the beauty in that is it's self-sorted. So if I come back to doing the things I know that are right for me, I know that I take that stress off my back. And so I'm very excited for this period of 2-3 weeks to come, where I get to just come back to me a little bit. But reminding myself that 3 weeks at the end of the year or the start of the year won't solve the challenge of the next 49 weeks being fucking manic.
Yeah. No, it's build real habits, real standards, real systems. That's not just a Band-Aid fix. Go, cool. Took a breath, and now I'm like, go back into the chaos, and the cycle continues. It's like, what can you take into 2025? What will you learn in this next 2 to 3 week period that will fundamentally change you moving into 2025? I'm much the same. I think mine was a little bit maybe more intentional, whereas I have felt similar, where I felt like I've swayed away from myself, and I wouldn't say as far as lost myself, but I guess I've given away parts of myself to other avenues this year, for great measure. I've invested in other areas than myself willingly, enough for me to now feel like, hey Joe, it's time to get back to yourself. And the ventures that I've invested in have been I went into partnership with another creative. We're now a creative duo. So I put a lot of my investment, my energy into this business venture. And we've done great this year. It's been amazing. I've gone into relationship, and we've spent a year. We're now been together for a year. A lot of my energy has gone into that relationship too. So I've willingly put my energy in these 2 different baskets, which require a lot of energy, and they've both flourished. They've both thrived. And I knew I was doing it. And my little investments back into myself, well, I'll give myself a sauna, half an hour sauna once a week. We keep that because we know we feel ourselves when we get that 30 minutes of silence. And then I was like, we go to the gym at least 3 times a week. We're going to the gym to work out, not jujitsu, the gym, because I work out alone and I can do it in silence or I can do it with music, but it's me time. So they were the only 2 little investments I gave back to myself. And it's been enough to sustain me through the year-ish. Now I'm at the pointy end of it where it's like, similar to what you're saying, Brad, I kind of like don't feel fully in touch with myself. So I go, okay, Joe, the next 2-3 weeks is time for you to invest back in yourself. And what does that look like? For me, it looks like building that 365-day habit, which was a mindfulness practice every single day. And so since December the 1st, I added that back in because I knew how awesome that was when I did it last time, which was I sit by myself in silence for at least 10 minutes a day without fail. I can admit I've already missed one day. And part of me was like, fuck, you failed. Like the last time you set this non-negotiable, you did it without failure. And then from December 1st to now the December 22nd, I've already missed one day. It was the Christmas party and I got home late and I was tired. But that's okay. I gave myself grace for that. But that's a part of me going, this is what I need for myself. Building that sense of self, that self-worth, that self-love is sitting by myself with myself and decluttering the thoughts of the day. And so part of my system to get back to myself is investing back in myself. So I'd imagine you have modalities that you do which will bring you closer to yourself, or are you still kind of searching for those ones?
Yeah, there's certainly things that I know that are very good for me, and it's usually somewhat exercise related, but I'm finding it's equally important. I caught up with a good mate of mine, a mate of all of us, a guy that we know, Joey Dicko, probably a month ago. And we caught up for a coffee at the beach and to lie down in the sun. And I had this realization as I lied down next to him that this was the first time in 8 months I'd taken myself to go catch up with a mate in the sun and just chill. It's the first time I'd actually got, like, I'd go for a swim in the water quite a lot, post-run or post-gym, but it's the first time I'd gone without a rush and actually just gone and done something. Like where I didn't habit stack it or I didn't kill 2 birds with one stone. Yeah. And I was like, far out, man, I've got to be better at this. I think, so for me, it's actually less about, I think next year, less about bringing things into my world to improve that state of being and to get further in touch with myself, but kind of back to the David philosophy, taking the expectation or taking the volume of stuff away in order to just have a little bit more time to be present. Yeah. So I was thinking around one of my other lessons was I don't like being in a rush, but I'm always in a rush. I feel like I rush through my year, and I was thinking about this. What does that say about myself? Because I like when things are sometimes fast-paced. Not all the time, but I enjoy fast chapters. I enjoy fast moments of life. But there's a difference between being in a rush and moving fast. And I think the difference is you can't rush with intention. And even with the pod, with the lack of time I have, whilst one of my goals for this year, which is very immeasurable, but I think comes with a level of intuition, is I wanted to be proud of the catalogue I put out and love listening back to it. And I really have. I feel very proud that I've achieved that this year. And you should. But I felt like I rushed to do so. Yeah. Because every week it was like, fuck, like I've just recorded this. All right, now I've got to edit it. I've got to upload it. I'm sitting in my lunch break at work trying to edit up some clips. And because of that, I wasn't moving with the kind of intention I'd like to promote the pod and make sure that the right parts of each pod reach people and have the kind of purpose-driven effect I want to have. And so I feel like there's been just a little bit of lack of intention in some areas of my life because I'm in a rush. And so I think for me, it's just trying not to rush in 2025. Being okay with, I don't need to, there's no written law. It wasn't written in a cave thousands of years ago that the podcast needs to be released every week. If I can do that in a way that's conducive to it and me moving in the right direction, amazing. But if I need to take a mid-year break for 2 weeks to recenter myself, I'm not that important in the podcast sphere that people are like, fucking hell, where's a lot to talk about the last 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Like, I need my oxygen. Like, it's, you know, like, think of your craft seriously, but in order to do so, don't put yourself on a pedestal and think of yourself so seriously all the time. You're allowed to be a human.
Yeah.
I think I read a quote by Hermosi somewhere talking about there's no perfect way to live your 20s. If you sacrifice all your social life, relationships and everything to go all in on a business, then obviously you're going to suffer with the relationship and the connection side of things. But then the flip side of that coin, if you party, go overseas, do all that, and you're not where you want to be financially, like there's no perfect way to live it. Just kind of the balance of what you're talking about. I think like trying to be where you want to be professionally, but also enjoying life as you go. I think to reframe it, there's no perfect way to do it.
No, life is not linear. That's my first realization.
I've gone full circle.
Yeah. Well, I think just hearing you say that, Phoons, I think I agree. There's no perfect way to do it. The closest way to perfect is do it with some sort of awareness or intention of what you're doing. It's like, hey, I'm choosing to like just let my hair down and be a bit hedonistic right now. And this is that season.
You can't rush with intention.
You can't rush with intention. Yeah. And so if I look back, I was pretty like blind. My eyes were closed, so to speak, until I felt maybe like early 20s. I felt like we've spoken about it in that cruise control, kind of just going through life. And then you kind of look back after an experience and you're like, whoa, like who am I? Or like who do I want to be? Or how did I get here? And then you kind of start to develop yourself as a man, as a person. And that's when I was introduced to self-development. Before that, I was just fucking floating in the wind like a leaf. And I was lucky enough to be in Australia, so everything was cruisy, and I'm just moving without any intention, any consciousness. I was completely unconscious. But to think like there's no perfect way to do it, because if you choose to party, if you choose to go all in on business, if you choose to go all in on relationship, whatever your choice is, having the awareness that you're doing it with intention, and that makes it the right thing to do. Because with that intention, you can gain the lessons. You can get the gems from whatever it is you're doing, instead of just being on this flywheel of human doing, without the lessons that come with those experiences, which you're going to have to repeat those experiences until you get the lessons. I believe that's how the universe operates. It's like until you learn the lesson, you're going to have to keep doing it.
The Chinese water torture of life. Yeah. Until you find a way out.
Until you learn to turn off that tap.
Yeah, it's going to keep dripping.
Yeah. So I like what you said, Phoons. You know, you can do your 20s however you want. And if we extrapolate this into the rest of our life, we can do our 30s however we want, our 40s however we want. As long as we do it with intention, we try to squeeze as much lessons, learnings, and actually have the life experience from whatever we're doing. And then we can move into the next chapter, the next iteration. Because if it wasn't relationships then, it has to be relationships now. If it's not business now, it has to be business at some point. But wherever you are, and this is what you touched on before, wherever you are, being present enough to have that experience, being in the moment enough to gain the lesson of what you're doing, and then you can be fulfilled and grow as a human being because you were there. You were consciously there. You were moving with intention. And I guess a little bit of a ramble, but that's maybe what I want to take into 2025 for myself, is be closer to myself enough to not be rushing through life. And I love that. I think we're going to start using that. You can't rush through something if you're doing it with intention. You can move fast. We want to move fast. We want to grow. We want to keep moving. But let's not rush through life. Let's move fast through life with intention if that's our choice. Or we can slow down with intention. We can get as close to stopping, pausing, disconnecting, and just being, and that's the next 2-3 weeks for me. So I really like that as a reframing of mindset, Brad. That
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. For me, simply put, my 2025 ethos is just to live with intention. And I think that is simple enough to focus on, harder in practice, but simple enough in theory to just any time I feel disconnected from myself, just that little reminder. Like,
Set
hey,
intention.
move with intention here. Move with intention. Phoons, what do you feel like for you has been one of the bigger challenges or bigger insights of the year personally, aside from the stuff that we've already touched on?
Well, definitely having the business failure and moving on from that. I think it kind of resonates back to me that I do have resilience, which is good. Like, I can move forward in life knowing that if hard things do happen, I know that I'll show up. Like, if I go out, I'm going out on my sword. So it's like something I can respect about myself. It's just probably being more intentional with where I want to be and taking clear steps towards that. So it definitely resonated with what you said before in terms of, like, I do put a lot of pressure on myself, but then what's the flip side of that? If I don't put any pressure on myself, who would I be? So I think it's probably being grateful for that pressure. But something I do struggle with is definitely I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm not where I want to be, and that definitely creeps into my dating life because I struggle to see myself as a good partner if I'm not meeting my own standards. Like, how can I expect someone to love me when I'd say I love myself, but I wouldn't say I'm thrilled with myself, or like I'm not where I want to be, and that definitely creeps into like that sort into the dating aspect anyway. I struggle to see myself as like a good partner because I'm not meeting my own standards.
So with that, Phoons, and thanks for that honesty, because I think that's pretty vulnerable of you. Do you think if you don't feel as if you're meeting your own standards, do you think you're ready for a relationship? Because you can want relationship. We've identified that, but are you ready for
a stress or a tension I do feel where I do want to be in a relationship, but I struggle to see myself as a good partner. So then it's just like that tension, or I'm in that no man's land at the moment. But then it's like, do I just lie to myself and accept myself for where I am so I can be comfortable in a relationship? Or is it the constant pressure of I think my mindset is I'm probably always going to have that little bit of pressure where I push myself to constantly be better. Do I just have to learn to live with that and accept myself and then learn to find a relationship from that place? Or, I don't really know the answer.
Can I just challenge you on something here? This was really interesting. It's interesting that this has come up because I had this conversation this week with Sean McEnroy. He quoted in the episode that we filmed that will be out just a little bit before this one.
Shameless plug.
He was speaking about Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, and how one of the thoughts that he really resonated with from the book was to set standards for yourself, but appropriately low standards. Not to suggest that you set standards beneath what you know you're capable of, but not to set every standard for yourself to a position that you're always reaching for or always feels a little bit out of reach.
I think my mindset is I naturally set goals that are almost unattainable, so I'm constantly stretching myself or pushing myself.
So I want to challenge you on this because I think that your standards for yourself are very high, right? It's probably safe to say that we all feel a little bit of that. However, the way that you show up as a mate and the way that you show up for the people in your life, I think is quite admirable. Now, to think that there might be a challenge that a lot of people feel with maybe a bit of self-love and compassion, we've spoken about that today, for yourself is maybe the thing that's getting in the way of you feeling like you can be a good partner for somebody. Because I would argue that what do most people want in relationship? They want to feel loved, appreciated, a sense of security and trust. And of course there are many other things, but that's essentially the foundation of it. They want to feel loved, appreciated, like they are creating a life with somebody that they care for. And I think that we think about relationships sometimes in more grandiose terms than it actually needs to exist in. And we have this problem as guys, which I think gets in the way for a lot of guys. It's a limiting belief that until I'm absolutely perfect, I can't be who I need to be for somebody else. And the truth is, you'll probably never reach the standards or heights that you set for yourself, that's why they are the heights that you set for yourself.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, because in past relationships where a girl has been in love with me, it's kind of felt weird that I'm not where I want to be, but she loves me for who I am, and then it's like it feels like it's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
It's like, do I have to lower my standards to love me for who I am now, or this feels like a constant tension or a constant internal battle? Really, it's only my fault. This only exists in my head. No one else feels this.
Did it feel, when you were in those experiences of someone loving you and you're like, well, I'm not even, where I need to be, were you living inauthentically? So it was as if this person that's loving you isn't really loving you. They're loving like a weird version of you that you're putting forward to them. Or was it that experience, or did you not necessarily love yourself? So for them to love you was a bit confusing. Was it either of those?
Yeah, I'd say it was the second one. I think I truly love myself. So when someone else reflected that back to me, it was like a weird feeling.
Yeah. So maybe similar to what Brad's saying, it's less of a conversation of, well, I need to achieve more because then I can be in a position to be in relationship and worthy of love. Maybe I need to like work on loving myself more so that then I can feel comfortable in being loved. And I went through a period when I came out of my past relationship, and then I had it's probably 6 to 8 months before I met my now partner, and that was a rebuilding period for me, which was rebuild that self-identity, rebuild that self-love, that self-worth, parts of myself that naturally you give away in relationship. I had to regain and find. So that time alone was crucial for me to go, who are you, Joe? And let's find that mojo again. Let's get that love back. And thankfully enough, I have amazing support networks. I have amazing family, and I had amazing practices to get me back to that place pretty quickly to go, nah, you are pretty fucking awesome, Joe. And you are someone that should be loved, and that is, if someone's with you, that they are lucky to be with you because you are a good person. And so to get to that place, and it sounds a little bit egotistic, but I think that self-love piece is super important. And then just when I hit the precipice of like, nah, we're good, Joe. Like, no, you're proud of yourself. You love yourself and things are amazing. I met Jesse. But before then, it was like, I kind of probably wasn't ready to be in a relationship. Mind you, it had nothing to do with achieving more. But I did have the thoughts of, what do you actually look like as a prospect? Now that you're back in the dating market and back in the game, so to speak, like, what have you got going for yourself? And there is a piece there to go, cool, I can up level here. If you feel like there's areas for you to up level, it's like, maybe I'm not ready for a relationship right now because I really do need to work on X, Y, or Z. But whatever your propensity is, whether it's like, I'll never be enough, or it's an honest review of yourself to go, hey, actually, no, I do need to like figure out these things a little bit, and then I will be actually a suitable partner. So I find like that balance maybe.
As I get older, I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think they can move forward together in synchrony in terms of finding someone and becoming a better version of yourself.
100%, because to assume that when you find relationship that you are the perfect finished product will ultimately be the demise of any relationship. As we've said many times, relationship is almost the ultimate mirror staring back at you, reflecting maybe all of the things that you need to work on in yourself. I was listening to Gabor Mate this morning, and he was saying that people who struggle to feel loved by another are often in search of love from the original relationship, whether that be a parent or the love of themselves. Wow. And I think that's really interesting, that it's hard to recognize the love that someone else is showing you unless you know what love feels like within you. And like that's often like born from childhood or born from the self, in this case, in which if you struggle to give yourself any love or compassion, you can't see that when someone else is giving it to you. You can't recognize it.
Well, it's definitely reflective of relationships I had in my early 20s when I realized I was prioritizing short-term relationships, but I was basically just seeking the validation in random women that I didn't get in my mother.
Yeah.
which I definitely resonate with what you said.
You
just
can see
then.
that now, yeah.
Yeah, and I
That's
think the
powerful.
reason I'm so pressed on challenging you about it is I want to see that for you, because I know how good that has felt for both of us to have. And it's like, it's nice to think that, well, I feel like you're very deserving of it. And so I'm like, oh, I'd love for you to bring that person to the table, the games table, not because I want them to see how awful you are at spoons, but rather because I feel like you really deserve it at this point in your life. And I know it's been a talking point of our podcast over the last year and a half, but your arc as a human and your progress as a human has been quite remarkable to see from a mate's perspective. So you should be really proud of that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Well, yeah, it was only 2 years ago that I almost overdosed, so trying to come back and just introduce self-love into my life, I think it's just a thing that does take time. You can't just click your fingers and have self-love. I think it is a bit of a journey.
Consistent.
Kind of sounds pretty fucking corny to talk about, but
It's cliche for a reason.
You're preaching to the choir here, brother.
yeah, it's something I do need to work on. It's something I have struggled with my whole life, but now that it's kind of clear as day in front of me, I can be intentional with it.
Yeah.
For sure.
To be, and for what it's worth, Phoons, I think I've obviously got to see you a little bit more, and outside of just the podcast, we do jiu-jitsu together now. And I think, and when I see you at the gym as well, I think there's a certain like joy and cheekiness and happiness and grin that when I visualize you, I close my eyes and visualize you, I can just see you having this joyful little grin on your face. And I've noticed that in hanging out with you more and more, is that you have this lightness and this little cheeky joy to you at the moment, which I don't know if it's always been there, but I noticed it in you, and it's really refreshing and nice to see, because you feel like a little happy ball of joy. And so I don't know if that reflects how you feel inside, but yeah, it is radiating that a little bit of playfulness and joy. I can see it in you.
That's definitely my natural state, and I feel comfortable going back to that. I just lost touch with myself probably in my early 20s, dropped the ball, went off track, and now I just think I'm slowly coming back to being myself, which is kind of hard to talk about, that I don't even know who I am at 32, which kind of feels like you're meant to have all that shit figured out, but I definitely don't. But I'm going to keep trying and keep showing up, and I'll figure it out eventually, I think.
May I remind you that life is not linear.
You keep chipping away.
For sure.
David.
100%.
Yeah.
Joey,
Yeah.
what's come up for you this year?
So this year, like I touched on, has been, when I think of like the challenges of the year, and I've had a great year. Like I look back on this year and it's almost hard to go, man, what was the hardest things? What were the big lessons? And similar to what you said, Brad, there was nothing catastrophic that I can just go, man, that's the thing I had to work through. So that to me shows objectively it's been an awesome year, but not without challenge. So like I mentioned, new relationship, romantic relationship. Jesse and I started dating a year ago now. So the challenges and the nuances of meeting someone, moving in with someone, being in relationship has been really illuminating, because it's shown me parts of myself which I thought that I'd maybe mastered, or parts of myself that I didn't necessarily know were an issue until you start to be in relation with someone else. And so for me, we've mentioned it, the idea of that people pleaser complex, the want or the need to want to fix or change or heal broken parts of people has crept in at times, that Jessie has been an absolutely beautiful mirror at showing me when I'm falling into that tendency. And she is so self-aware that she allows me to, she allows herself to be a beacon back to me when I am a little bit foggy and not as self-aware of myself. But there's challenges in that when you're being shown parts of yourself that you thought you had under control. Like that was a lesson from a previous time, that I need to drop the people pleaser, that I need to let things go and allow, things don't need to be, I can't fix everything, and things aren't broken for me to change. And when that comes back up, you're kind of like, oh wow, we're still doing that a little bit. And so there's a little bit of frustration that comes with that, but it's also the beautiful lesson, and how grateful for me to be in a space where someone can mirror that back to me and go, hey, let's keep working on that.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Keeping me accountable to a certain standard, yeah.
Do you think the lessons that you learn, do you think we maybe hold ourselves in too high regard as humans, that a lesson learned is a skill that we'll always immediately have to act on, as opposed to the lesson learned from relationship 3 years ago is a challenge that's still going to come up, but I'm going to be quicker to identify it now?
Absolutely. I think it's nice to think that we figure something out and then it's mastered, like a video game. You know, you acquire that skill and now it's a skill that you no longer have to worry about. But relationships are, to me, the biggest, the thing that exposes the most in us. And I got to a point where outside of relationship, like I said, I found my mojo, I found my groove. I was only accountable to myself, and I know how to do that really well. And then when you add another whole human into the mix, the complexities of honoring yourself and honoring them, and creating boundaries and respecting their boundaries, and all of the intertwining emotions that come with losing independence but gaining companionship, and wanting freedom but loving union. Like, there's so many overlapping things that my brain has had to contend with in relationship. But the foundation of alignment and knowing that I'm with the right person, that we are moving in the same direction and that we have the same values, has been the awesome part of our foundations as we learn more and more about each other in this first year. But like I said, things that I thought I'd mastered, sounds silly, have reared their head and have given me more opportunity to dive back into them. And so that would be the challenge of, I guess, romantic relationship. And then moving into a business relationship, which almost feels like a romantic relationship in itself, in that you're setting boundaries, you're learning what works for people, what doesn't, you're wanting to be heard, but you're needing to listen. You have to nurture parts of their personalities, and you have to put forward parts of your personality. So as two creatives coming into business together with strong independent egos, because we've both been self-employed for the better part of 10 years, there have been challenges that have arose there that we've both been able to confront. And again, we align on our values, which is open, honest communication. And so my business partner and I have been able to confront these challenges head on, speak them into existence, and then with the greater objective of working towards a shared goal, move through them. And so the challenges of being like, well, I want to be the alpha creative and you want to be the alpha creative, and I want my decision to be heard here and you want your decision to be heard here, has shown me that, man, my ego is strong. You know, like, we have this idea of, let's like dissolve the ego, and we need the ego because it helps us be driven, ambitious, but you also don't want it to be overruling. And when you get into a space in business, especially, I've realized that it has been harder for me to let go of my ego, and my ego has wanted to be heard, and it has shown me how, I guess, dominant that ego can be in myself. And that's something that has been challenging to confront, but also, yeah, it's just shown me more of myself in a new relationship and going, oh, fuck. I didn't realize that I was so like worried about not being heard, that I'm fighting for my voice to be heard. Like, where does that come from? Like, oh, okay, I need these wins. Why do I need these wins? Do you need to be right, or do you want to win? Are you trying to be dominant here? Like, and all of these questions come up that I welcome, because I get to go, what's this about, Joe? Like, you know, all of those questions have come up previously in, I guess, other relationships, broken down romantic relationships. Like, what was that about? But it's been really interesting to see it come up in business when you are now accountable not just for yourself, but you're also accountable for somebody else, and you have to take another human being into account professionally. It's shown me parts of myself which I've had to, I guess, navigate. So that's been another challenge. And then I guess...
Before you leave that, can I just ask you one thing that I think... Because hearing you say that, I recognise so many of those feelings in myself.
Okay.
Professionally and in life, like that ego that sometimes you don't think is really there, that you're trying to explain yourself to make people think, oh, Brad's kind of figured out, and like, you know, there's just all these things that I resonate with. There are so many parallels between what you explain in your business relationship, and I think any relationship that people experience, whether it be friends, partners, in their workplace. What's the business relationship in particular taught you about compatibility? Because you spoke there about compatibility of values, but from an outsider's perspective, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, and I've met Gus once, but you guys are quite different people, right? So not exactly compatible in personality, but compatible in values.
Yep.
How do you think, well, what have you learned about compatibility in business this year?
Well, like I said, it almost feels as if the business relationship has created the same challenges as a romantic relationship, in that the thing that we've fallen back to in times of difficulty has been our value systems. And so Gus and I really we've had moments where we've gone, dude, I love and respect you. And that's why we can sit here and speak the hard truths to one another. Because if I didn't love and respect you, I wouldn't give you that courtesy. I would just say this isn't working, let's move on. But we fall to the strengths of our values and our beliefs because whilst we're very different people, we align on how we want to show up in the world. And that's with honesty, and that's with positivity, and that's with creativity, and that's with ambition. So these are personal values which we both hold. And then that aligns us enough to go, as people, we fit. So let's move into the business world, and that kind of just amplifies what we're trying to do individually. But when if you weren't aligned, I find is you hit resistance points, which of course you can work through, but fundamental values I think are as important in a business relationship as they are in a romantic relationship. And so this is the first time I've had to go into partnership with someone, and I think I got super lucky that I mean Gus and I have worked together on and off for the better part of 6 or 7 years. So I think it was a really organic way for us to realize that, no, we get each other. But if you were to be finding a business partner, I think meeting the person first before understanding what can you do for me professionally, I think is the key to longevity.
Fuck, that's a great insight. Yeah.
And if I think about how would I meet a potential partner, it's not, well, what can you do for me long term? Like, you know, how, like, are you going to be able to, like, bear children? Like, whatever it is in relationship of what you need your partner to do for you, I think you need to meet them with their values. And I guess as a bit of a tangent, like, Jesse and I had those conversations very early, and it was so refreshing because she knew. She'd had those conversations with herself far before I was bringing them to the table with her, much like I had those conversations with myself before she needed to ask me. And I guess that's what we do here on the podcast is we go, well, what are our values? What do we believe? What are our weak spots? What do we need to work on? Where do we want to go? And so when you meet someone and you have those conversations, you realize pretty quickly whether things are matching or not. And so Jesse and I had those really open and honest conversations early, which has made things feel like they have just like moved at a really fast but natural pace for us to be moved in and living together after a year was something historically where I haven't done that. But I guess when you know, you know. So those two relationships definitely have parallels. I guess something for me, and I'd spoken on it probably in the podcast over the year or so, were some challenges with family relationship. So without, with respect of the people's privacy at play, there've been some challenging family relationships that I think I've had to relearn a lesson around this fantasy that we maybe have around family of this person is supposed to be this for me because they're my uncle, or this person's supposed to do this for me because they're my auntie, or they're my sibling, or they're my grandparent. And instead of seeing people for who they are, which is complex individuals that are on their own journey, I've been very good at doing that externally. It's easier maybe to do it to people who you're not as close to. They're not your blood. But then when you have people who you are close to, maybe in positions that aren't great for them, or they're not in a good position, or they're making decisions that aren't amazing, that don't align with your values, it's really hard to not hurt, or to be hurt by another person's life journey. And so there's been a particular relationship within family which has been quite challenging this year for myself and our family, that kind of the lesson that I've got from it, and something that I've only come to over the last few months, is respecting that you can't change people unless they're willing to change. And even then, it's not your job to do so. And that's maybe a lesson that popped back up, which I'd realized in romantic relationship. It's not my job to fix broken people. It's not my job to change, not my job to heal. So I could identify that moving into romantic relationship. It's not. But when it came to family, I've only just realized that has crept in, where I've really wanted different for someone, and I've tried to show them the way, and I've tried to offer resource and support, and only to be undermined, and only to have that person make decisions outside of what I thought we both saw as important, that we both valued.
Yeah, but I reckon that's coming from a place of positivity from your perspective, because you just simply want what's best for them. So I think there's probably that stress there when they're acting in a way that is not the best way that they could be acting, but then it's not your responsibility to change them.
And that's been a really hard lesson, because you do love them, and a really difficult lesson, which I guess I'm still kind of feeling through, is this idea of acceptance, of accepting people for exactly as they are. And although you might want different or better for them, allowing them to have their experience, because the only person who is suffering here is me, if I allow myself to create this fantasy story around who they should be, where they should be, what their potential is, what they should be doing. You see the beauty, or you see the potential in someone, and you create a story around how they should be that, how they should get there. And because we love them, we want them to be that. We want them to get there.
Just quickly, do you think that's the biggest struggle of being a parent, is probably that?
Oh, well, I've seen how my mum has been affected by this person's decisions, and it's tenfold of how I've been affected, because I think that's maybe a similar thing to grapple with, is the narrative that we assign to people that isn't reality, which is a story that we've created to I guess fulfill a certain dynamic in what we think this relationship should be. So accepting someone for where they are, I think has been a huge lesson when it has come to this particular relationship. And whilst it's been painful, whilst it's been heartbreaking, it has created a landscape for me to go, the relationship wasn't what I thought it was. It was different to how I wanted it to be, and I need to accept that. So now there's a rebuild phase of going, well, what does the relationship look like? How do you want the relationship to be? And I know this all sounds very cryptic, but just bear with me. The idea of creating boundaries again has popped up. And so this is something that I learnt in past relationship, which I hadn't really honored, which was boundaries. And the idea of having these relationships, the idea of boundaries felt restrictive and it felt controlling and it felt, it didn't feel like a healthy way to relate. I thought that in romantic relationship, I'm not going to put boundaries on you. You need to be your freest, fullest expression of yourself. And I'm going to love you unconditionally through whatever it may be, however you choose to express. This was the symptom of someone who was trying to people please, who wanted to be liked, who was trying to impress, who didn't want to create any discomfort for their partner because their partner needed to be nurtured and healed and saved and changed. And the way for me to do that is to just let them really express however they wanted to express. I now realize that's an unhealthy way to relate, and that boundaries are actually healthy and they're necessary. And so in any relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's business, whether it's family, I've realized now, when it comes to family especially, that you can and should create boundaries when it comes to your family or your friends as well. And that's just not to control, but to put in protective measures that will allow both of you to show respect to one another in saying, here's how I choose to be loved and how I want to be loved in this relationship. And with respect to these boundaries, this is what works for me. And if the other person in the relationship, whether it's a family member or partner, can say, hey, I respect those boundaries and I'm willing to honor those. And we can move forward because we align and we have similar values, then that's a beautiful relationship. Would you not want a relationship where you understand what is going to hurt the person and what's not going to hurt the person? How far can we move within these boundaries and still feel like we're heard, seen, loved, protected? That to me sounds like an amazing relationship. But I'd never really considered that boundaries with family members were necessary as well. I didn't in relationship romantically, and then I realized, no, that's important. I knew pretty early in business because of my experience in romantic relationships, hey, set boundaries. Boundaries are great. They're healthy. You know where you're at, but you need to communicate those boundaries and you need to enforce those boundaries saying, hey, when this thing happened, that crossed a boundary for me. And let's speak on it so that you're aware of my boundaries. And that way we both know where we're at and we can move forward.
Yeah, the quote I heard somewhere, I can't remember who said it, so I'll just claim it myself. Unspoken intentions are future resentments.
Yes. And that to me is the idea of like, firstly, if you don't hold the value of open and honest communication, it becomes unspoken intentions and future resentments. But communicating these boundaries and then enforcing them, going, hey, you know what? This is my boundary. And again, we've crossed it. I don't know if we're respecting each other's boundaries like we should. We need to re-navigate this relationship. That's an enforcement, which is so fucking hard to do if you struggle with being a bit of a people pleaser. And I know this is something you've struggled with, Brad. The idea of creating discomfort, inconvenience, or a little bit of resistance when it's someone you care about, love, or even a stranger, because you don't want to rock the boat. You want to keep the peace. And it's easier just to please because that way you're liked. You're not disagreeable. You're easy to get along with. That's a people pleaser complex.
Giving away pieces of you to make other people happy.
Exactly. And the pieces you're giving away, you dropping your boundaries. So that's been a lesson that I've learned, the importance of boundaries. But even family, there should be boundaries. We're all human beings. We're adults. We're moving through stages in our life where we need to meet people for where they're at, like I said before. And you need to accept that some people are at different stages to you and that boundaries are necessary in order for relationships to thrive. And that's the hardest to do when you love those people. So, well, for me
it's
at least.
a powerful lesson that you can see it in different areas of your life, whether that be romantic relationships, family, business, like being able to tie that all together. And just even for me, thinking about it, even changing the word boundaries to intentions. I think that still works. Like communicating your intentions is the same as almost setting a boundary.
Yeah.
Yes.
The idea of communicating the intentions, it's a way of us both understanding, like I said, how we want to be loved, how we want to be respected, what we want moving forward.
It's almost showing the cards in your hand.
Yeah.
The hardest thing about like love is such a beautiful emotion, but it can also be such a frustrating emotion, because when you care for someone so deeply and you can see that maybe their decisions in this case have negatively affected their life and them, you feel this, almost the default emotion is frustration, because you want to almost shake them and say, hey, like, you're so amazing and you're so great and we all love you so much for this reason, but the thing you're doing is hurting you. And there's such a frustration that comes with that, but then almost your frustration is met with frustration in return. And part of the acceptance is almost being able to accept their decision and approach it with compassion and love. And even though it's incredibly difficult, understanding, because you don't want to push them further down the path that they're heading down. And it's the biggest challenge of the human condition. And this is, I guess, my grapple with self-help, is no matter how many books you read about a certain topic, no matter how many podcasts you listen to or lessons you learn in literature, you ultimately have to learn it yourself and choose to apply it to your life. You can go to every Tony Robbins guru seminar about mastering yourself, but if you're not showing up and acting with those lessons in your life, you're just the guy that attends seminars. Like, you're no better equipped to handle the challenges of your life than the person who just learns it in real time and chooses to change it. And it's a fucking challenge. And part of being a people pleaser, which you're correct, I highly resonate with, is I recently, just in a life scenario, I was talking to Sophie about it yesterday, having a chat to her, and she was reminding me of the fact that I am not responsible for other people's feelings all the time. And that's something I have to relearn consistently, because when you are a higher care person, you take on the feelings of everybody else. And it's such a process, man, to get past that. So I feel for you. I feel deeply for you, because it's a challenging space to exist in.
Absolutely, man. And you spoke about frustration there, and a lesson that I know you and I, Brad, have spoken about at length off camera is this idea of acceptance. And so that's something that that I've really, really felt like I've grasped this year. Well, I thought I had, until this certain relationship, and it maybe took me a little bit longer to get to that place of acceptance than I would have liked. And because there was that deep love for this person, there is that deep love for that person, to be able to accept the reality of their experience and understand that it's not mine to change, nor is it in my control to influence. And so the frustration and that the emotions, the negative emotions that oftentimes come around any situation, is a symptom of not accepting. So we have an experience, an incident, something happens at A, and there's a resolution at B. That resolution to me is acceptance. The period in between A and B is the suffering. So the quicker we can get to acceptance from A, the incident, to B, the acceptance, reduces the amount of suffering we feel. And I think for me, that is the process. which
Man,
is,
that's a great insight.
how quickly can I get to acceptance of this isn't mine to fix, this isn't mine to change, this just is.
What's that skill set?
I think having the awareness of, like I said, understanding that if it's not in my control, then it's not for me to, it's for me to accept. And if it is in my control, then I must take action. So once we take action, that to me is an example of accepting. So I'm not going to act on something that I haven't accepted. I can't accept that this is the new reality. So how am I going to act towards, take steps towards fixing it or moving past it or healing from it? Because I haven't accepted it. I'm still grieving it. I'm still suffering. And as we live in that suffering, that oftentimes looks like I'm still trying to change it and I'm still trying to fix it and I still don't want it to be what it is. And I can't, no, I don't want to see the reality of the situation. And that's pain and that's suffering. And that to me is frustration. Something happens at work. I'm frustrated about it. The sooner that I can accept it's happened, past tense, I can't change the fact that this has happened or is happening. The sooner I accept it, the frustration diminish, and then I can move towards the new reality, which is the old reality has passed. I'm creating a new reality based off of my actions. I'm not creating a new reality based off my actions until I can accept it. And so that's been a really key lesson for me that I've had to apply to a family-based relationship, which was hard for me to accept because I still was grasping so tightly to the delusion of what I wanted it to be. It wasn't reality. The incidents, the experiences of said person were happening, and I didn't like that. The narrative for me was supposed to be different. And the acceptance for me has only come in the last week or two. And that looked to me like communicating those boundaries.
Just quickly, how do you know once you've reached acceptance?
I mean, you stop being frustrated. You stop suffering. You stop. It still hurts, but it's not this affliction that I'm grappling with. It's not the thing that's waking me up at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep about it. It's not the thing that's I'm lost in the fantasy of what should be or what isn't. So it's kind of annoying where I go, okay, I accept it, and I vocalize it. I guess the people around you, like Jesse, is aware because I go, you know what, here's where I'm at. I think I have to accept this, and so maybe it's a knowing, maybe it's an intuitive thing, but once you accept it, the whole landscape changes. And so that to me, to get to that point of acceptance after the suffering and the frustration, allowed me to create a new reality based on that acceptance. And that was me opening up to the person with open and honest communication and saying, hey, here's how I've actually been impacted by your decisions. And this is why I haven't been able to speak to you. This is why we haven't been communicating. This is why. And so I offered that communication to this person, and then with that created some boundaries. So as long as we're not in alignment and you're choosing to make these decisions, I don't know how we can have a healthy relationship moving forward. And there's the boundary. There's the capsule. And there's the confines of this relationship. Respect it if you choose to. If you don't choose to respect it, then I need to accept that this relationship is broken down and needs to move on. And so again, when it's people you love, when you have a tendency to want to people please, when you're not great at creating boundaries historically, this has been like a lot of growth and it's been challenging work for me. So that's maybe the biggest lesson is I understood how important acceptance was to dissolve suffering. But when it came to the closest person in a family dynamic, that got murky. And yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's something that a lot of people will resonate with on different levels and for different reasons. It's interesting. There were a few things that popped into my mind that I've heard recently that made a lot of sense with what you said, and you kind of tied it in your own way, in your own experience, that when you spoke about the distance between realization of what's unfolding and the acceptance of it, that difference is the suffering. I think for a lot of people, that suffering is the feeling of guilt or shame. And what I mean by that is the feeling of, I feel shameful that I'm so frustrated, so cranky and can't accept this. And that ultimately makes you feel bad about feeling feelings. And you got to be careful of that because you can close yourself off. And I think as soon as you choose to accept it, you have to remove yourself of any of the guilt or shame that you felt in the process.
Yep.
Otherwise, you really haven't moved forward from it. You're still stuck in it. It's a negative emotion and it will corrode you moving forward. It will corrode that relationship or situation, whatever it is. There's something you said at the end about once you accept that the reality changes. I was listening to Joe Dispenza recently and he says that your personality creates your personal reality. And I think that choice to accept, your choice to accept that changes the whole reality that you start to experience then moving forward. On the inverse, your personal reality can affect your personality in negative ways if you choose not to accept and you choose to exist in suffering and shame and guilt about it all.
Yeah.
And so it can either be a lesson that uplifts you and levels you up and creates a greater sense of compassion for others and yourself, or it can be the thing that is ultimately corrosive to your character and your sense of being and has a negative effect then on everything else in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between being a positive person and being a self-aware person or being a victim of circumstance. And you see that victims tend to corrode themselves in every other area of their life.
And I think victimhood is based in a narrative that's not serving, right? And so when you're in that suffering, when you're in that frustration, when you're in that guilt, shame, it's because the narrative that you've written about said event or experience is one that isn't conducive to your higher self, that feeds into and leans into the negative emotions. But like you said, Brad, when you can try to look at the reality of a situation and not attach the story to it, not attach the emotions to it, it gives you a better chance at accepting it for what it was, and then you can rewrite the new reality. You get to subscribe a new story to the event that just happened. So, for example, if you look at it in the context of actually, you know what, I'm not even going to go there. I was going to look at it in the point of someone who was like sexually abused that might hold shame or guilt. I don't want to speak on that. That's not my place to speak on.
That's an extreme version.
That's an extreme version. But the idea of having an event happen that you can ascribe personal guilt to, shame, that objectively was out of your control. Once you can accept that this event happened, you can add a more productive narrative to it that allows you to craft a healthier reality. The event didn't change. You stripped emotion and story away from it. You accepted it, and then you added a new story, which is conducive to a healthier, productive, positive life, not stuck in victimhood. That's a fucking hard process to do. That is a very hard process to do. And that's where you need the help of therapy to help you create distance from the event, to dissolve deep traumatic emotion from the event, to give you the chance to even accept it. That's where work is. But this is how I look at the process of incident to acceptance.
Just you talking about acceptance then, I think that's something that I have struggled with in my own life. And I think acceptance has to come in two parts. One, logically, you have to accept it in your head. But then two, emotionally, you have to move on as well. And I think there can be a lag in those two. Like,
which do you think comes first, logic?
Definitely logic. Like, you have to make the conscious decision that you want to move on. But then there's almost the friction of trying to get your emotions to move in the same way that your brain wants to go. I think there's a lag there, and that's something that I have struggled with. But just touching on what you said, I think rewriting that narrative gives something for your emotions to tie onto as opposed to the old narrative.
Yeah, that's a great insight too. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm just basically tying that back to, I really like the acceptance, or the event and then the acceptance. Then I think the acceptance is two parts: one, logical, and then two, emotional. Logical decisions, pretty easy to make. You can see from self-awareness, okay, I need to stop thinking this or telling myself this. But then rewriting a positive narrative, I think, can help you move on emotionally a lot quicker. Stop that lag.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe the challenge for most people in any area of life, is that you kind of intuitively know that. Like you realize something that isn't serving you in your life, and you go, like, logically, that's ridiculous. And for somebody, that might be you look in the mirror and you hate the way that you look, and you're critical of your appearance, but your mum tells you you're handsome, or the people in your life tell you you're handsome, or whatever it is. I'm using silly examples here, but it's certainly true that you can realize that something isn't serving you. Logically, be aware of that. This is just a ridiculous limiting belief, and there's actually no foundation to believe this. But then to emotionally accept it and rewrite the narrative and go, well, hey, I'm a handsome boy. It's a skill.
Especially if you've felt those emotions for so long and they're second nature, they're almost subconscious. You don't know. It's like it's difficult to change emotions that are subconscious.
Yeah.
Do you guys resonate with I've heard a lot of therapists and psychologists talk about this, that you aren't your feelings.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's where...
Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, because often you can feel like your life is materializing as the result of the things that you feel.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I heard Chris Williamson and Chris Bumstead talking about how you can feel something, feel guilty about feeling it, then think, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you feel guilty for feeling a feeling? But then ultimately come back to terrorize yourself for thinking about it all and feeling it and
I feel
feeling
silly
guilty in
for
the first
feeling
place.
guilty for feeling a feeling.
Yeah, it's like a ridiculous circle that continues to fucking spin and orbit around your being.
Yeah.
Where it's such a skill, but I think that's the beauty of this, right? Is when you have an inner circle of people that you can trust, or whether that's a professional, to be able to sit down and objectively sit with someone else. And like for us today, I take great joy in being able to say to Phoons, hey, man, you're a great human being and a great friend and a great person to have in our lives. It would be silly of you to think that narrative can't exist for a partner. Like, I think that's the beauty of good friendship and good people in your life, and the beauty of great partnership is you can feel... Oh, like Soph and I have got this thing where she calls me handsome agansome, right? And as ridiculous as that sounds, right? I know that sounds ridiculous out loud.
The McGanson bit.
Yeah. Handsome agansome. It's ridiculous to say out loud. But there is a part of it that rewrites a little bit of a narrative of insecurity that each and every one of us have in us. And that's the safety you get in your personal, close inner circle relationships, is they help you rewrite those emotional narratives.
Well, it's thank you for offering that handsome against him. So there's actually a concept that was introduced to me. I did a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat, which we've spoken about before. And one of the, concepts that was offered in this meditative teaching was observation and anicca. Anicca means ever-changing. So much like the cells of our body are born, live, die, to be born again, live, die. Our skin cells are microscopically falling off and dying without us knowing at the same time that they're regenerating. So this too shall pass. Things are born, live, die, and are reborn again. These concepts of ever changing, ever moving, things will flow through us, is a concept that was introduced alongside the idea of observing that change. And so as we sit there in deep meditation, and these are 2-hour-long sits, so they are quite deep, the whole process was to simply observe the sensation, the emotion, the thought that would come into your mind, hold significance and weight, but ultimately pass through, only for another sensation or thought to enter your mind, dissolve and pass through. And so you get to develop the skill of observing the emotion as opposed to identifying with it. And so even in the language we use, so for someone to say, man, I am sad. well, you're not sad. You are feeling sad. And because you are not your feelings, you don't need to identify with it. But you can just observe that I am feeling sad. I am sad is an identity. I am happy is an identity. I am feeling sad. I am feeling happy. A changing, fleeting emotion that you will allow to pass through you with time and with by honoring the emotion. So we'd sit there in these meditations, and even if you think about a physical symptoms, there'd be a pain in your knee because you're sitting cross-legged and you're in an hour 45 and that knee is just throbbing, and all you would have to do is observe the sensation and try to describe it in your mind. Wow, it's kind of a dull throbbing, and it seems to be about 2 inches on the inside of my knee, and it's kind of a warm sensation. Oh, that's interesting. It's kind of turning into a pins and needles kind of numbness. Okay, so that numbness is spreading kind of throughout the knee. Oh, okay. It's not actually throbbing anymore, and it's not warm. It's kind of gone, but now I've got an itch on my nose. And so the better you get at simply observing, it brings you a level of peace that you don't identify with the thing. And that to me is the skill of moving through the emotion, of not identifying with the emotion. It is having the ability to sit outside of it and realize that you are not your emotion.
It's almost that life becomes a game of whack-a-mole. It's like there's always something that pops up.
Yeah.
You have to first accept that something will always pop up. I think this is the challenge that I've heard people talk about when they've struggled with addiction or something major in their life. Is they're like, I thought I was past that. Like I thought I knocked that mole down. It's like it will pop up again at some point in your life as a trigger of something or a result of something. You probably have to accept that it's going to be the case and just know that you're equipped with the tools to emotionally deal with it and observe it.
I mean, life doesn't get easier, you just get better.
Yeah, that's the simplest and most effective way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all fun and games until you get a nose itch.
Oh, trust me, that's the most difficult part of the 10-day meditation is you get to a place where I forget what they call it. It's like a noble sit where for the 2 hours you're not supposed to move. You can't move. And that's what they're building you up to, not identifying with the pain in your hip, the pain in your back, the itch in your nose. And those are quite extreme because you lose sensation and you kind of lose your perception in space and you're not sure, am I tilting or am I laying back now? I don't even know. I've been in meditation for 2 hours and haven't moved and I can't feel anything and it's tough. But anyways, I digress. Yeah.
Lads, 2 hours, 7 minutes, 2 hours, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Plenty of chat here. Is there anything we want to cover off on before we kind of ease out of the conversation?
I think a good way to probably wrap it up will be just notifying a few things that you don't want to do in 2025 or things that are going to drag you off course.
Yeah. I'm just going to be super, super like tangible is social media addiction. Yeah. If I can get a grasp on that, and it's not again, maybe I'm trying to diminish it. It's not this addiction where I'm like can't put it down, but it has way too much of a grasp on me than I'm comfortable with, to the point where it's stealing my bandwidth and my attention far more than I'm comfortable allowing. And so the phone mixed with checking crypto, mixed with watching content on YouTube, even if it's educational, mixed with the 35 podcasters that I follow, mixed with the Spotify playlist that I'm adding to, all of it in conjunction is constant stimulation where I can feel and notice my inability to hold focus for longer periods of time, to even my memory, short-term memory, because I'm not actually focused when I'm in conversation or when I'm putting my keys somewhere. And then these little diminishing symptoms, because I'm just outsourcing so much of my attention to lights and noises and images and I want to get back to my dopamine being satisfied by sitting down and reading some ink on a page, or sitting down and listening to the waves crash, not needing to have music playing in the background whilst I'm at the beach because it makes my experience better, you know? I want my dopamine to reset and not need the need to be fed by all this stimuli. So next year, being far more intentional with how I utilize social media as opposed to being used by it. Social media, devices, all of the like. Yeah.
As a 30-year-old man, you're self-aware or conscious of those struggles. But imagine being a 15-year-old kid born into that.
Dude, my 7-year-old brother, he's iPad, he's getting his gaming set up for Christmas. I'm like, it scares me because I know how it's affecting me. That small, undeveloped brain, it worries me. It worries me on how that attention deficit will only be like completely fucking cooked by the time he's my age.
Change the development of their brain.
I know, that's what worries me.
We were kind of lucky that I was definitely in my 20s before social media got that real addictive tendency to it. Like
I agree.
Had Facebook and stuff when I was 15, but like you'd post one status, you'd be on there for 5 minutes and there's kind of not much need to be on there. But now, like how the algorithms are, it's like feeding me stuff. I'm like, I can't fucking put it down.
Dude, and we're arguably self-aware adults. It's like, man, they haven't got a chance as kids. Their little brains are just being just controlled. Our big brains are being controlled. So their little brains are like, if it's Roblox or Fortnite or who knows what it is, it's just like a lot. But I'm not a parent. It's not my job to tell people how to parent their kids. I can only try to parent myself.
I think for me, continue to prioritize health. I think the older I get, the more I realize how important it is. And then continue doing hard things. I think it's, as the older you get, it's easier to kind of go into your shell and shy away from it. But keep doing stuff that challenges me physically, emotionally. Yeah, keep putting myself out there.
Yeah,
I like that. I think that's a good one. I think certainly for me, probably the key theme of today, at least what I've interpreted from everything we've said, is if you're living with intention, you're moving in the right direction. And I think I love my insight personally for the year that I can't rush with intention. And I think that's incredibly relevant to
that was a banger.
Relationship, to work, to self-love and self-awareness, is that if I'm in a space of intention, I'm moving well. And that certainly applies. I really feel what you said, Joey, about the social media. I tried to do a little 1-week challenge recently where I didn't go on social media
and
before.
Do 7 hours a day.
Yeah. It's like, I'll only have 11 hours of screen time a day.
Really be like that.
It's the challenge was just not to be on social media before 7 a.m. or after 7 a.m., which is not a huge ask. Literally the first day I woke up and I'm like, challenge starts today. Pick my phone up and go on Instagram. Like it was, for me, I realized that the addiction is so unconscious. Like it's greater than a conscious desire. It's an unconscious behavior that has been so learnt. And I think naturally being intentful removes me from that. So not having the shame or guilt, I get the novelty of the challenge because it gives you something to aspire to either remove or introduce into your life, but being less rigid about that, because I think with the failure of that comes a little bit of shame or guilt in yourself that am I seriously so ridiculous that I can't stay off social media, because there is utility to social media for my work and for social connection with you boys, and I love sending you guys valuable stuff that I see, and I love when you do that as well. But just going like, when I'm here, just move with a bit of intention, like unfollow the shit that I don't think has any benefit on my life. If I see a funny meme, feel comfortable laughing at it and sharing it with the boys, but don't need to then go and find another 10. Like, be happy that I seen one, be happy that I come across a great pod that I might listen to, but exist in my life outside of this. And I think if I'm moving with intention, I'm being a little bit kinder to myself. But probably for me, just some health goals this year. I'll likely run another marathon. We're in a block for that, which I'm more excited about the intention of building towards that in a way that's sustainable long term. but also getting like good quality time running with Soph in the morning. But with my health, I'm trying to encourage myself to be more intuitive, like listen to my body a little bit more. I think I can fall victim to that Goggins mentality of, just fucking do more, get over it. Doesn't matter if you're sore, doesn't matter if you're busted. Just run the marathon with bleeding lungs because it's incredibly noble and it's fucking fierce and it looks good. But sometimes, like this morning, I woke up, I just felt busted, man. My body's just sore. I just had a couple big days of training. I've just come off 2 weeks of the worst gout I've ever had. I was sick with the flu. And like my first instinct was to go and bust myself. And I was like, bro, just have a stretch and move around.
Dude, it's literally telling you. And you've had a few bouts of gout this year, and you've also said it's probably the most like rushed, maybe stressed. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but like maybe stressed, rushed you've been in a while. Your body's whispering to you, and then it starts to talk to you, and then it starts to yell at you,
Sure.
and then it will fucking demand of you. So maybe it's a mindset that turns into the body will follow.
Well, I think that's why for me, almost important this year, I'll set myself some goals. I had 7 goals moving into 2024, and if I'm remembering correctly, I ticked about 5 of those off. A couple of them I know were pretty aspirational and pretty big and didn't quite get there, but tick some off that I'm really proud of. And I think I'll set a few goals for myself moving into 2025, but I want to set more what we spoke about before, some standards. The James Clear quote that we rarely rise to the level of our goals, but rather fall to the level of our systems. Set some good, consistent systems in place, which often means they're set to an appropriately low standard that you can consistently meet. And that doesn't mean that there should be a complete lack of discipline or a complete lack of effort, but a measured amount of discipline and effort. And for me, just thinking so much so about, like, I'm the kind of person, that dreamer archetype, that I'm always in the belief that the next episode of my podcast could change my life. The next session could be the difference between breaking through the 3-hour 40 marathon barrier or not. And I think that is an aspirational place to exist, but it's also a potentially challenging place to exist because you put too much emphasis on tomorrow and not enough on something that Sean was talking to me about during the week. The little seemingly insignificant efforts that over time, 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, add up to be absolutely enormous and can make you completely unrecognizable from the person you were 5 years ago, that you can consistently show up and do. Yeah, brush the pegs, man. Make the bed. There's a reason why most people think of 12 Rules of Life, Jordan Peterson's book. And if you ask them if they've read that book and you said, what's the first thing? They'd go, make your bed. Because it's simple, but it's effective.
Yep.
So that's for me just a couple of things I'm thinking of. I'm just trying to keep it simple, but well measured.
Yep. Well, this has been a big year for us all. I think, the joy of doing these podcasts has been unreal as well. I want to keep it going and keep checking in with you guys and speaking what's on our mind and expressing how we're feeling as 3 young men trying to navigate this crazy world we live in. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. 2025. Here we come.
100%.
I'm excited. Let's do it.
Yes, sir.
Hey, and I just want to say love you, boys. Really appreciate you. This is...
Fooney's still working through some things, as you can see. I love you, Brad. I love you, Fooney.
It's going.
You too. He goes, thank you.
Thank you.
See?
I receive your love.
You don't say I love you to hear I love you back. You say it because you mean it. So
no, it's and I really do. And I say this all the time to Soph. I feel very privileged at this point in my life to feel like I have my biggest blessing is the people I have around me. And that's a very nice thing to be able to say. So
absolutely.
Very happy to say that.
Yeah, I love you, boys. And second that.
Appreciate it. Happy to be part of your lives. Excited for 2025. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's go.